What you've just told me, Conway, could finish your career.
I realize that, sir.
When do you plan to see Captain Gunderson?
Right after I leave here, Mr. Matthews.
Now, wait a minute. Let's think about this. Now, that doesn't mean I'm condoning this false report.
Oh, I know that, sir.
Since advice here is free and I give it out all day long, do you mind if I give you some?
I certainly could use it, Mr. Matthews.
Well, I'd suggest you don't do anything. Just go about your work. Brown's preliminary hearing doesn't come up for a couple of days, so let me think it over, huh? Dan had told me of his friendship with Lieutenant Walsh. Fortunately, I ran across Walsh at the police academy while I was waiting for Captain Gunderson to join me for lunch.
What first attracted me to Dan was his sincere desire to become a good officer. I couldn't believe he'd foul up a report. When I found out about it, it threw me. But after what you told me, how Dan came to you, I guess I wasn't wrong about the kid.
Then there are two of us who think that Dan is worth going to bat for.
Captain Gunderson, Bart.
Maybe it's best if I speak to him alone.
Much.
Well, John, right on time.
Well, it's a free lunch. I'm always prompt. What's on your mind, Bart?
How do I have to have something on my mind to ask you to lunch?
To give you a short answer, yes.
Well, all right. It's a hypothetical case. I'm curious to know how you'd handle it if it were up to you.
Let's have it.
Well, suppose that one of your probationers, in his anxiety to make good in your eyes, overstepped himself.
How?
I'll get to that, but let's say that getting on the force as a regular is almost an obsession with this fellow. Now, he's worried that he hasn't made much of a record so far. Then he makes a pinch.
What kind of a pinch?
Well, maybe he catches a man who snatches a purse. A witness sees the man drop the purse, identifies the suspect, turns the purse over to the officer, who gets a little flustered. Now, remember, it's his first arrest. He forgets to take the witness's name.
I'd put him on the carpet.
Oh, but there's more, John. He's sure the man is the thief, but he knows what to expect if he admits the error in his report. So he falsifies it, says that he found the purse on the man when he frisked him.
And you want what kind of action I'd take? I'd kick your hypothetical officer right off the force. Come on, let's eat. Hi, Bart.
Hello, John.
I asked you to come over today because I've got a hypothetical case for you.
Oh, yeah?
Sit down. Suppose in my spot, you get a memo from the DA that a case has been dropped in which one of your probationers had made the arrest. Let's say a pickpocket suspect is being sent back to Omaha for jumping parole. You follow me?
Sure.
So you give a final check to the officer's report. Your probationer's first pinch. Now, certain facts ring a bell. Makes you think of a luncheon conversation you had. In other words, putting two and two together, you're sure the report was falsified. What would you do?
Well, I'm sure I'd look into the circumstances first.
Let's stop shadowboxing, Bart. We're both talking about Dan Conway. Evidently, he falsified his report. And if so, he ought to be washed out.
I suppose so, John, if you just want to go by the rules. But if you knew the facts...
The facts are he's been derelict in his duties. Why are you so interested in him anyway?
If Dan has made a mistake, no one knows it better than he does. Oh, I agree with you. If a wrong has been committed, it should be punished. But he's had his punishment. A punishment much bigger than you could ever mete out. A tortured conscience. So tortured that he came to see me on his own. And he would have gone to see you if I hadn't stopped him. Voluntarily, he admitted to me that he falsified his report, even though he knew that no one would ever discover his lie if he chose to live with it. Now, it took a brave man to do that, John, a big man. It showed character and respect for the uniform. Keep him on the force, and I'll underwrite him. We need men like that.
All right, Bart. I'm sold.
Thanks, John. You won't regret it.
Now get out of here, will you, before you talk me into promoting the guy to a sergeant.
But seriously, Bart,
We can't overlook this thing entirely. Suppose I recommend 30 days suspension.
don't you think 5 days would serve the same purpose?
Now I know why you're such a good public defender.
Thanks, John. When Dan finally became a member of the force, there was a celebration.
You cut the cake, Dan.
You know, this is one day I'll never forget. And I've got you to thank for it, Mr. Matthews. I suppose some people might think, why all the celebration? Just another cop.
But you're a very special one to me, Dan.
And Dan Conway became a very special one to all of us, with a very special place in our hearts. As we laid him to rest, we all remembered how he had worn his badge with honor for 7 years. Then, 2 days ago, as he was driving home, he noticed a car wildly careening down the highway. In a matter of seconds, it would collide head-on with a school bus. Deliberately sideswiping it on his motorcycle, Dan Conway saved the lives of a dozen school children and gave his own.
Ready. Aim. Fire. Now.
It's good to remember this story of Dan Conway, for too often we take for granted the courageous deeds of our police. The case you have just seen was brought to a fair and just conclusion through the efforts of a public defender.